One thing I do want to point out before we move into the next demonstration, because just in case you're not aware, I mean this dark background color and the way this fades in and fades out, you notice how it fades into the modal and then you get the dark background. When you close it, it fades out. That's all controlled in this particular modal dialog styling that we did. The actual background color is right here. This is that dark black background with the 0.85 alpha setting where it's almost solid. This is where we actually control that ease in, ease out transition, and we give it a 500 millisecond time with the opacity. We could actually make this, let's make it 2 seconds just to give you an idea what I mean. You can actually set this 2 seconds. I'm gonna take out the milliseconds, save the change. You can set this to any size or time that you want. You'll notice now it seems to take a little longer to fade in and fade out. I could actually make this transition, and again, I like to use milliseconds. 500 milliseconds is actually a good time, but we could actually change this from ease in, ease out. Could it be ease in, out? I mean, there's a bunch of different settings we can use with this transition property for these particular types of devices that we built inside of our web pages. I mean, there's all kinds of cool things that we can do with this. If we wanted the background to be a little lighter, we could make this 0.50. I mean, play around with the settings. Some of the new background properties in CSS are really, really cool. I mean, we can do some cool things with them. So now you notice it's not near as dark just by changing that setting. So again, play around with them, do the things you want to do, get on the W3C, look at this transition property, all the things that it supports, because it does support a lot of stuff. I'm going to put this back to 8.5 because I actually like 8.5 for modal windows. But I just wanted you to see where those were coming from because I wasn't certain I made it clear as we were setting them up. But that's where these backgrounds and stuff are coming from inside this modal, is where we actually set up that modal dialog. And we're going to actually use that same dialog in the next modal. I didn't refresh the browser window. Inside the next modal. So we're going to reuse some of this code in the next modal that we're going to create. All right, so now let's build a different type of modal that could be used as a login form. We'll begin by adding the HTML structure. We'll be placing this HTML code inside the container element that we created in the first exercise. And again, we're going to be reusing a lot of the CSS from that first exercise so that we don't have to do a configuration from the very beginning. We'll actually be using some of those classes that we set up in the first demonstration. I could begin a new file for the demonstration, but I wanted to add this modal to our existing file to show you that you're not limited to one modal per page. Based on this ID that we actually call in the link and the ID that we actually assign to the modal itself, that's how we actually just distinguish which modal we're calling. Like on the first modal, we actually said first modal, and we gave it that octothorpe character or the number symbol. Again, we gave the modal that first modal ID. We're going to do the same thing with this one. We're actually going to add a new link and give it a unique ID. So I am going to come down below the closing div for our last modal and above my closing container div, and I'm going to add a new div. And again, I'm going to copy this so you don't have to watch me type it, but I'm going to come right down inside there and I'm going to add a new div with an ID of login modal and a class of modal dialog. And again, we'll be reusing that modal dialog class that we set up. I'm going to go ahead and close that div out, and I'm just going to go ahead and add my comment like we do in all the tutorials. So I'm going to add a comment here that this is the actual closing login modal div. And then inside that div, I'm just going to add a couple of blank lines. Let me go ahead and pull out some of these blank lines, kind of clean up our code a little bit. I am going to save those changes. Notice the modal window is sharing the same class that we used with the previous demonstration. This is not a requirement, but it's good practice to cut down on the code bloat in our documents. And again, what I'm talking about is this modal dialog class that we set up for the last demonstration we'll be reusing in this one. Since the modals will share many of the same styling features, using common classes is quite common. Good time to pause if you want to get that div in. Inside that div, I'm actually going to place another div. So I'm going to come right down inside that div, place another div with a class of content, and I'm going to come right above where I closed out my modal, and I'm going to close out that content div. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy that comment, Control C on the PC, Command C on the Mac, and go ahead and paste it in there. And I'm just going to say closing content div. And again, I just like labeling these because we get so many closing divs one on top of the other. It's hard to keep track of what's going on. All right, now let's add the modal window content itself. So again, inside my content div, the first thing I'm going to do, let's put in a couple blank lines so we got some space. I'm going to scroll up so you can easily see. I'm going to put an anchor tag with my close feature inside there. So I'm going to go ahead and put an anchor tag right inside that div. Let me go ahead and tab in. So I've got an anchor tag with an href of ID of close. And again, my title is going to be close, and I'm actually going to use that close class that we set up in the previous demonstration. Then I'm going to open up another div with a class of layer right below that anchor tag. So I'm going to come right below it. I'm going to open up another div with a class of layer. Then I'm going to put in my closing div tag for the layer. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and make the comment that that's the closing div for the layer. And then right inside there, I want to go ahead and add my H2, which is going to be the title for this particular modal. So inside that layer div, I'm going to put an H2. And that's going to say login to site. Inside my H2, I'm going to add a paragraph tag. That's just going to give them a little bit of instructions as to what they're supposed to do with this particular modal. For complete access, log in. Then right below there, I'm actually going to put an input element. And the input element is actually going to contain my placeholder for my email address. So I'm going to come right in below that paragraph tag. I'm going to add an input element. That's going to have a class of login with a type of text. My placeholder text is going to be enter your email address. Right below that, I'm actually going to put in a line break. And again, because I want to use a line break between these two elements so they're not so close together, because right below that one, I'm actually going to have a password field. So I'm going to come down right below my line break, put in a password field. And again, I'm going to give that a class of login. Type is password, placeholders, enter your password. I'm going to put another line break right below that one. And again, I'm just doing this to give some space between my input elements. We could have done it with styling. I would just rather use the break tag because it's part of the structure. Then I'm going to add a submit button right below that. And right below the submit button, I'm going to actually have a register on site button. Because I'm going to give them the opportunity, if they haven't already registered, they can register on the site. I'm going to go ahead and pull out some of these blank lines. This is a great time to pause. I'm going to go ahead and save all those changes. Let me put a little bit of separation here for what we just put in. I'm going to come right down below the content. And I'm going to, yeah, actually that's good. That area right in here is the text that, or the structure that we just put in for this particular demonstration. This is a great time to pause if you need to get that entered into your document. I'm going to go ahead and refresh my browser window. We're starting to see that page, although we don't have a link there yet to bring it up, but I'm going to add the link right now. So I'm going to go back up to the top to the UL. Inside that UL, I want to add a second link. So I'm going to scroll all the way up to the very top UL, where we have the open modal one, and I'm actually going to put in another link that says login modal login. And again, this ID is referencing the ID that we actually gave the modal. If you scroll down and look at the modal itself, you'll see we gave it an ID of login modal, and that's what we're referencing with this particular octothorpe in the href. We're saying octothorpe login modal, so it's going to that ID to actually bring it up. Save all the changes. Good time to pause if you need to get the link in. Let me go get back to that page. Good time to pause if you need to get the link in. And then I'm going to scroll back down to that second modal, the login modal we just put in, and that's a good time to pause if you need to catch up with that code. Because what we're getting ready to do now is we're actually going to get ready to start adding our CSS. All right, so let's go back into our styles.css file and actually start adding some of the CSS for this particular modal. I'm going to go ahead and grab that comment where our first modal is. I'm going to copy it, Control-C on the PC, Command-C on the Mac. I'm going to come down to the bottom and paste it, because this is actually going to be our login modal styling. Having problems talking today. Don't know why. I think I've been trying to do too many things in too short a period of time. I'm just going to add some space in here because I normally do. All right, so the first thing we want to address is let's address that content class that we set up right here, where we actually put this second modal together. I put in a class of content. So I want to go ahead and address the styling for that particular class. And again, so you don't have to watch me type it, I'm actually going to copy this from my notes, and I'm going to say content, your background image is my travel to image, and it's another image that I actually have inside my images folder. Background repeat is no repeat. Your background position is left top, so the top left corner. I want you to actually cover the modal with the margin of 0 top and bottom, auto left and right. So it's actually going to center that little travel image inside of our modal. And then I'm going to actually address the layer class that we set up. So I'm going to come right down below the content. And I'm going to say layer. Your padding is 10 pixels on top, 0 pixels right, 20 pixels on bottom, 25 pixels left. Your margin top is 10 pixels. Your background color is 100, 100, 100 at 70% transparency. Text alignment is center, and your border radius is 15. So now we're actually setting up the layer, which actually makes up the content of the modal window itself. I'm going to save all those changes. Let's go back into our styles.css. Good time to pause if you need to get those put in. I am going to go ahead and refresh our browser window, because now we should actually be able to see our login link, and we can kind of bring up our login form because we're picking up a lot of the styles from the previous demonstration. So if I were to type something in here and I were to submit it, and everything is obviously starting to work. Very cool. All right, so right below layer, let's start looking at the login modal itself. So the login modal's got an ID of login modal. So I actually want to style the color for the text to black. I'm sorry, to white. The login form is going to have a margin top and bottom of 0 and auto left and right. So I'm going to come down right below that and put that in. That's the class login form. And then my login class itself, and these are going to be my actual elements, are going to have a line height of 20 pixels. And again, we're talking about the login class now, which is right here. These are the classes for our actual elements, our input elements. Line height of 20 pixels, margin top and bottom of 5 pixels, left and right of 0. Let's go ahead and save those changes. Not going to have a lot of difference in the thing yet, so we're not going to refresh our browser inside the window yet, so we're not going to refresh the browser. Good time to pause if you want to get those 3 put in. Now I actually want to style the buttons, because if we actually come in here and we bring this form up, got these 2 buttons on the bottom, and they're kind of coming around by the way we've set them up, but they're nowhere near where I want them to be. But you can see now we've got our image in the back. We've got this nice grayed out background for our form itself. I've got all these little features in here, but I do want to style these buttons just to make it look a little more professional. So I'm going to go back into my styles.css, and the first thing I want to do is hit the button element itself. And when I say hit, I mean style, not physically hit. It would do nothing to hit it. So I'm going to go to the button element. I am going to give it a color of pound octothorpe CCC. And that's going to be a gray, kind of a very light gray, padding top and bottom 5 pixels, padding left and right 10 pixels. Then I'm going to put a text shadow on the text, 1 pixel X, 1 pixel Y, with a color of 346392. Background color is going to be 3F75A4. And the background image is going to be a linear gradient. And again, we're talking about the button itself now. And I've given it from the top, so it's going to come from the top and it's going to gradient to those 2 different colors. My box shadow inset is going to be 0001 pixel with that color. My border is going to be done, and my border radius is going to be 5 pixels. Then I want to actually set up a hover effect. So I'm going to come down right below my button, and I'm going to set. So I want a button hover effect with a box shadow inset of 0001 pixel with octothorpe 274496D, and then 0, 5 pixel, 15 pixels for my offset. And again, that's going to be octothorpe 193047. And then the active button is actually going to have its own box shadow. So I'm going to copy that and put that right below the hover effect. And it's going to have a box shadow with an inset of 0001 pixel. Same colors as before, but the inset's a little bit different. If it's active, it's actually going to have a 35 pixel, 0, 5 pixel, 30 pixel offset. Goodness gracious, say that fast 5 times. And by the way, that's going to be inset on that second setting. Let's go ahead and save all those changes. This is a great time to pause if you want to get the button settings in. I'm going to go ahead and refresh my browser window so you can actually see what our finished product looks like. And now we've got these nice buttons with this nice inset. Got these nice configured boxes. I've got a really nice modal, and again, it's working all off of those links. We've actually set these modals up with nothing more than HTML5, HTML, because 5 is just the version iteration of HTML, and then CSS3. So the additions of CSS3. The newer properties in CSS have given us a lot of opportunities to do things that we couldn't do before with some of these transition properties, these new shadow properties, these animation effects that we can do with CSS. It's really given us an opportunity to do things that we could never do without the use of JavaScript or some other third-party plugin as we were actually playing with our HTML structure and our CSS styling. So why is our modal box better? You could be thinking to yourself, you know, I can actually get a JavaScript modal box and plug it in and just use it, and it's not a problem, and I can do all these different things with it. As you probably noticed, the big selling point with this technique is creating a modal box in nothing but HTML5 and CSS3. So why is that such a big deal? Modal boxes in JavaScript are something a beginner could create. There's hundreds of examples and downloads ready to be used. So why don't we just scrap JavaScript in favor of HTML5 and CSS3? It would be naive of me to say that one selling point is making sure with JavaScript we can use them, because only 2% of the people in the world have actually disabled JavaScript in their browsers. So having JavaScript disabled in the browser is not a reason not to use JavaScript modals. Taking advantage of the CSS3 transition when creating a modal box gives you some of the idea of the power that we have with some of the new features in CSS3. We only use 3 lines of code to create the animations that we did with all these transitions for the backgrounds, the nice fade in and fade out, the nice transitions as we go into the modal box and back to our desktop. 3 lines of code. If you compare that to any JavaScript animation library, you'll be shocked to see how much code is minimized by using this HTML and CSS properties. I mean, sometimes some of the animations in JavaScript are 50, 60, 100 lines of code to get it to do some of the things that we can do now with CSS. If you compare that to any JavaScript animation library, you'll be shocked. And I mean, I'm very serious. This leads to another reason, that is we have cleaner code. By using HTML and CSS, our code is very clean and compacted. We know what div that the animation is applied to. Again, it's only 3 lines. We can go right inside that div if we go back up here and look at those transitions that we set up in that modal dialog. It's very few lines of code to get this stuff to work. And we know exactly where it is, so if we want to change it, we can go in and change it. But a bigger reason than that is HTML5 and CSS3 are the future of web development. Everybody is working to implement them into their designs and projects, and using them helps perpetuate its adoption and ensures the rendering engines and the browsers follow suit. The more that they're used, the more that they're going to be, I don't want to say forced to come in line, but the more that they're going to want to be in line with the standards, because everybody's using browsers that support the standards. Plus you get cleaner code. You don't have to worry about JavaScript libraries. You have a whole slew of web designers and developers that are ready to help with any issues you might have because they're excited about these new features as well as I am. I mean, there's hundreds of developers that are very excited about the new features in CSS3 that I am aware of, that I know of, that I deal with continuously. HTML5 and CSS3 aren't going away. So there's no reason not to use them. And the more people that use them, the better off we'll be. So what can we do with the modals? Again, login and registration forms. We can display images and videos on our site in modal pop-up windows. We can request user feedback, advertisements. You can actually have modals that actually advertise for either other areas of the site or products that you're supporting or endorsing on your site. And that list just goes on and on. So use them. I mean, it's a really cool feature. The more you use it, the more you're going to be impressed with all the new things that we can do in CSS3. This tutorial with all the exercise files and the images is available on the website for a small fee. You can actually download all the videos, the presentation, although there's not much of a presentation with this one, all the exercise files, and the videos themselves. So, I mean, if you want to help support the site, I'd really appreciate it. I think it's going to be $3 or $4 or $5, something like that. I don't know, I haven't compiled it all together yet, but it helps support the site. It helps me develop and pay for all the support of the site because running a secure site is becoming extremely expensive. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial.